And good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, amazing products that we all know, love, and enjoy. And as part of our jobs, we don't get a whole lot of recognition. But guess what? Cara and I today, we're going to say, good job. We really appreciate all that you do. Thank you very much. If you're new, welcome. Pull up a chair. My name is Brian Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every Friday at 8 a.m., Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we talk about all things food safety. Now, part of this as well is this is not a presentation. This is not a webinar. This is meant to be a discussion. And the best part of this, and I'm sure Cara will agree to this too, is our guests. And we just have the most amazing audience who joins us every week. And we recognize that that is a significant investment of time. So hopefully we're able to bring you some good content today that will help in your jobs and make your life hopefully just a little teeny tiny bit better. So with that, of course, if you're familiar with the chat, one of the things that we love to do here is we let everybody in the world know where you are at. I am in Loveland, Colorado, where it's been absolutely gorgeous here. It's been a little overcast here this morning, Cara, but pretty nice overall. So where are you at in the world?
I'm actually in Rockford, Illinois, and it is beautiful here for Rockford.
Nice. And I see Tim is joining us. Tim, of course, was my guest last week, and Tim did an amazing job. He did a great job. And he's up in warm and sunny Nashville. So that's good. Whenever Tim is back home, that's a good thing. Elena, of course, who's also been a guest here on the chat. Wow, this is like a star-studded audience here so far here today. This is great. So nice seeing Elena. She's been very busy on LinkedIn as well. So good to see you, Elena. Very nice, very nice. So, got tons to go over here today. It's kind of an interesting topic for today as well. So I'm very interested in getting to that. So part of this as well is everybody join us or a drink of your favorite beverage. Joseph, good morning. Join us. Cheers. Women in science. Very nice. Because there was a lot going on with that this week, wasn't there?
There was. I was actually at the IDFA Women's Summit in Washington, D.C., and it was a lot of fun, but exhausting. So it was absolutely exhausting. So.
Very nice. So Anna is here, and Marin, of course. Very nice. So fantastic. So, all right. We're going to get to this probably a little earlier than normal, but we're going to get it out of the way. We're going to rip the Band-Aid off. Cara, are you ready?
I'm ready. I have a
ready
preview.
For the dad joke? Okay. I'm very proud of this dad joke here, by the way, for today. Cara, what is the fastest way to determine the sex of a chromosome?
I'll let the audience guess. How's that?
There you go. You pull down his jeans.
Oh my, that's a good one.
That's a good genetics one.
Yes. We actually gave my dad a calendar that's a dad joke a day this year, which is if you need any material, I can get you some.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's become part of my routine now is finding only just the top notch, the top tier, best of the best dad jokes. And then we bring them here to the show so that Morgan can enjoy those. So hopefully she's having a nice time in New York. Hopefully the weather's good for her back there. So we have a very interesting topic today, and I'm expecting a ton of input from our contributors here on the chat as well, Cara, is change. Right? And we are right now, you have to be living in a cave not to know that we're in the middle of just change everywhere. And you see posts on LinkedIn of people who are worried about the changes, and we see cutting in different committees. I think, what was it, the NCIMS? I think one of their committees that's been around forever has been cut. And I think it's got a lot of people stressed and worried. And so kind of what today we wanted to talk about as well is all of this different change out there. And I'm sure, Cara, as the director of food safety at ChemStation, you're constantly out there and talking with people. So I would imagine this was probably a pretty big topic at the conference too, right? With different people talking about these things.
It was. It was a. Change is always constant, right? Unfortunately, change is just, especially in our business, and it's an interesting thing that's going on right now. And I think the consensus is we just like some consistency. So not so much. It's gone. It's here. It's gone. It's here. And that we actually, we actually were fortunate enough to meet with some lawmakers and their staff, and they all said the same thing. We just want some consistency, so that we can plan. Right? It's hard to plan when you don't know what changes are coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important part that we as managers in food safety and quality and what we do is really important, is when we see change coming, that over communication is really, really important. And if you don't communicate with your teams, they're going to fill in the blanks for you, and they're going to start making stuff up, and it's going to be worst case scenario every time. And so you think you're taking the correct course of action by not communicating the information if you're not sure. But a lot of times, Cara, I think you can end up damaging, as doing more damage.
Yeah, I agree. It's if you're not transparent and thoughtful with your change, it can lead to chaos, and which is what we've seen happen just in industry in general, and now we're kind of seeing that happen too, right, in the government changes.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a big part of this is with this, number one, right? It's kind of like that old cliche, Cara, where it's like nothing is static. You're either growing or you're decaying. The idea that things are always in that same state is false, and a lot of times that gets us into trouble, because in food safety especially, you have to be constantly aware of change. And one of the things that I see, and I'm sure you see this as well, is we think, because in quality and technical fields, we like to control things. And once we feel that we've got this thing wrestled down to the ground, that now it's all under control, we don't have to worry about it. And a lot of times it catches you by surprise, because people very rarely update their food safety plans. It's like they don't think about it. And you'll go in there and you'll look at the food safety plan, and they haven't looked at it since last year. And probably the only reason they did that is because they have to. And they're saying, oh, no, everything's all exactly the same. Really, nothing changed in your company over the past year that impacted food safety. That's incredible. How did you do that?
Same suppliers, same ingredients, same people. I am going to challenge that.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. So really, that change mechanism, and this is written all through the quality standards, GFSI, everything else, is change management. And that mechanism is really important. And it's one of the reasons why it's so, for example, like the locals group that I have, which is free, and I'll put the link in here later on, is that you have to be constantly vigilant of what's going on out there in the world. One of the things that comes to mind for me, Cara, is enoki mushrooms. It's just like, I don't normally eat them, right? You may go to an Asian restaurant, see them in like some miso soup or something like this, right? They're those long, really stringy groups of mushrooms that have really small caps. And if you saw a picture, you know exactly what they were. Listeria. Oh my God, those things are having like listeria recalls like every other week. And I would, put out notifications and say, don't eat enoki mushrooms, whatever you do. And it kind of gets into that risk piece of things. If you have something that's inherently risky, an ingredient that has a high risk factor, or you're producing products for high risk groups. We saw recently some new recalls around nursing homes, for example. And those risk factors need to be taken into consideration. And that change piece of it is even more important. So with that, the higher your risk category, the more you need to be looking at risk and figuring out if things are changing. And that's really hard, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so difficult to again, you want to anticipate as much as you can. And I know one thing that came up, and I know we'll probably touch on this at the conference this week, is just the ingredient changes and supplier communication.
Yeah.
And the consensus in the summit that I was at was basically it doesn't happen. The communication doesn't happen between those entities, right? Not without a lot of work and a lot of pre-work and a lot of communication ahead of time.
Yes, that's a really good point. And with this, in a lot of ways, in the field that we work in, we have to become very good at predicting the future and looking out and saying, okay, these things are coming. They may or may not happen, but I need to prepare for those things, because we all know this is a fatal flaw. Do not get caught in your little box. And this is why going to conferences, Carr, like you were talking about with IDFA, is so important. And shows like this are so important, because just sitting back and thinking about these things sometimes is extremely valuable. You don't have to constantly be running around in your job like a chicken with your head cut off, thinking that that's doing stuff. A lot of times you have to just be thinking about things and thinking about it in terms of chances and probability. You don't have to think of yes or no. So, for example, let's say we've all seen the news out there. So RFK Jr. is now in charge of Health and Human Services, and he's been very open about some of the things that he wants to do. So he's talking about the big thing this week has been GRAS, generally regarded as safe notifications, and the mechanism for that. He wants to remove that. Okay, that could happen. What's the percentage? What's the chance of that happening? Okay, let's say it's 60, 70%. What should you be doing to prepare for that? What are the things you need to be thinking about? Is this modifying anything that R&D is doing? Does R&D know about this? You need to be reaching out to the groups in your company to talk about this as well. And it's kind of like Tim says here, right? And this is kind of the leper's bell for me of a company that's in trouble. Is, well, we've always done it this way. Nothing changes. Yeah. It's like that saying I use, which is things stay the same until they don't. And then when they change really, really fast.
Right.
I mean, just,
exactly. Yeah. And but you bring up I'm sorry. You bring up a good point in that the we have a bit of a anticipation on this now with them announcing that. So maybe put the systems in place, or at least start thinking about it. So if you do get a clue, take that clue and figure out where you can go with that.
Yeah, exactly. And so here's a good question, Carr, for us to kind of bring to the group is, can you share a positive example of how you persuaded upper management to financially support a change to bolster food safety assurance? Any thoughts around that?
It's all about management buy-in, right? And demonstrating. And I always hate to bring the bad news, but that's usually what we do in quality and food safety. And examples of that, the recent examples of recalls and things around that, where it could be really detrimental to your bottom line, brand damage, even to that.
Yeah. Well, and so part of this, and I think, and we've done chats on this before as well. So persuading upper management, number one, you have to communicate in their language, not our language. You can't go to senior management and say, oh, well, according to the GRAS requirements of what Health and Human Services is looking at, and 21 CFR 117 and the overlap with FSVP, right? No. You need to go to senior management and talk in terms of money, finance. And so part of our theme today with change is, if you're communicating in your company and you're giving this information and helping other departments look out and predict the future, you're going to be seen as a very valuable asset. And senior management's going to see that. And when you communicate potential risks and changes in the marketplace and contingencies with solutions, right? You just can't go to them with problems, and how it can potentially save the company money. That's where you need to be. So an example of this would be from, let's say, procurement. Right now, there's a giant problem going on with cocoa. Prices have gone pew, right? And I saw, was it a typhoon hit in Africa recently as well, too. So off the coast of Madagascar. That can influence vanilla and cocoa as well. So in procurement, one of the things that procurement does really well is they look at the future and they buy contracts and they hedge bets and they make sure that the pricing is stable within the company for these important ingredients. So procurement is able to say, okay, cocoa's going up, but good news, we're able to secure inventory for the next year at the lower price. I saved the company money by looking at the future, right? That's procurement being smart and proactive, and they're managing change. We need to do the same thing, don't we?
Absolutely. Yep. And that's a great example. And I love the idea, don't talk in our language. And again, money talks, right? Quality is generally seen as a cost center. And if we can demonstrate that initiatives will bring money to the bottom line, that's when you're going to be able to, when you're all of a sudden it flashed out. Sorry about that. Having some internet trouble here. But that's when you're going to win them over, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And notice as well within this, if you want to talk about food safety with senior management, look at the terminology you're using as well. So for example, it's much better to talk with senior management about risk mitigation, which is what food safety is risk mitigation. It's also what procurement and other groups are doing as well. If you can talk to them of food safety in terms of reducing risk for the company, they understand that. We all understand that. It's like auto insurance, right? We're reducing risk. Use that type of terminology. Figure out what they're doing.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I think that again, the terminology and getting it in their language is going to help you to communicate and get to the bottom line.
Yep, absolutely. And so part of what we wanted to do here today is give you some ideas of areas that you need to be thinking about for change within your company. So kind of the first piece I wanted to talk about, Cara, because we're seeing this quite a bit in the industry, is people. Changes in people, right? There's lots of changes going on. So if you had a nice cushy job at FDA and now all of a sudden you don't. And change in webinars. So all of a sudden your guest disappears. But she'll be back. She'll be back here shortly. So with people, a lot of times there's change, right? There's massive layoffs, changes in the organizations, how these things are working. You need to be looking at that because a lot of times within your company, if there are massive changes, the roles and responsibilities are going to change as well too. So who's actually managing those functions? Procurement, different personnel changes that we talked about. If you get a new CEO in your company, that's a massive, massive change. You need to understand that CEO's viewpoint. Does that CEO understand food? Maybe that CEO is really good at running companies, but he came from another industry, automotive or something. He needs to be brought up to speed on how the food industry works and the differences between managing risk in food versus managing risk in other areas. Let's see if Cara can come back.
I'm back. I don't know what happened there. It just quit on me. So
yeah, that's just the change we've got to deal with.
Right. Maybe I should turn off my camera just so that.
Let's do that. Let's give that a shot. We'll see
maybe
how
that'll
goes.
help.
Yeah, because
I'll give that a shot. I don't know what the deal is. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Who knows? Technology.
I've often heard that sound is much more important in conversations like this anyway. So if you've got bad video and good sound, you're okay. But if it's the reverse, it's not easy to listen to at all, for sure.
Right.
So we were just talking about changes in people, and if a new CEO comes in, Cara, huge, right?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. It's yeah, and changes in people right now seem to be again constant, like we were saying. So it's which is unfortunate, but at least according to my LinkedIn uh, uh, feed, there's been a lot of changes else in a lot of different locations. So
Yeah, definitely. And I always like to think about this in terms too of things you can control again and things you can't. Uh, can I control whether or not food dyes are going to be banned by the federal government? No, that's not at my pay level. But I can control my reaction, right?
right, exactly. Yep. And try and figure out where the best effort is for what you have to deal with, right? Exactly. Yeah, you can't control the change, but you can control, whatever you have control over is what you need to manage.
Exactly. And I think this kind of gets back to that contingency planning that we were talking about as well. Um, Another big category here, Cara, is ownership change. And I've gone through this before as well, where you'll work for a company and then all of a sudden they're acquired, and a new company owns that company, and they get rolled into that company. In the particular example I'm thinking of, I worked for Boulder Brands, so I was a VP of QA there. They were acquired by Pinnacle Foods, and then shortly after that, Pinnacle was acquired by ConAgra. So these type of acquisitions and things that go on are constantly impacting you, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I've been part of that several times when I was, and mergers and things
Yeah.
like that. And it can be a challenge. I was part of a small lab, Dr. Virginia Dybel owned, and we were purchased by Covance. And that was a bit of a culture shock because we were going from our nice little group of 20 people to a multi-million-dollar corporation with many different layers and expectations. And we kind of, and again, talk about change. We went from being able to control our little group to
Mhm.
having to answer to corporate entities and management. And if we, again, when you're in a tiny little family owned business, if we wanted to make a policy, we just made it. We just wrote it, and this, obviously in compliance with regulation. But when you enter into a large corporation, oh my gosh, that is a very different beast. So.
Yeah. Well, and part of this, if you are seen in that organization as somebody who is very connected, shares the type of information we're talking about today, you're viewed as a very good asset for that company, and your chances of surviving duplicate roles goes way up.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
and to correlate.
exactly. Yeah. It was again. Oh, go ahead. Go
Oh no,
ahead.
no,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's a culture shock, right? It's a very different aspect that you have to deal with just the layers and like Cortland is saying, sad when it results in reduced quality. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times when you go through these upheavals, that's going to happen no matter what. Right? There's going to be a dip. And we're kind of seeing that right now with this huge category that's impacting all of us is political and regulatory. So we have this new administration who's coming in, and they've only been in. This is kind of crazy, right? January, February, March, right? So going on, the third month now, and the pace of change has been unprecedented. It's nothing like we've seen before, and that stresses people out for sure. As a result of that, we've seen a pullback in the regulatory groups because they're going through the same thing we're going through. So if you're working at FDA, a lot of activities have stopped, and we were seeing changes with FDA last year as well with reorganization. So the regulatory agencies are in a large state of upheaval too, aren't they?
Oh, for sure. And I think again the common consensus on this is I think I saw in the news that they're rehiring back 6,000 USDA workers, and and that's wonderful news. But just again, the consistency in the change. How do we get some consistency? So
Well,
that's where. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
well, I was just going to say that. Well, we see this from the different politicians who are, putting out different talking points, seeing what people react to. Is the administration's using an axe when they should be using a scalpel, and these type of things, and those can be kind of hard to decipher. But part of this is getting context around who's doing what, and with the Trump administration, a lot of business people, and in business, we know this very well, don't we, Kara? Is that they tend to go too far, and then to your point, they bring it back. It's like, oh, we cut too many people, okay, let's bring these people back. So things are being broken on purpose and then rebuilt, and that can be very stressful. But in my viewpoint, in this particular situation, it's absolutely needed. So you need to be aware of that, don't you?
Absolutely right. Yeah, and definitely we don't want waste, obviously, and duplication. And again, when we were talking about acquisitions and things, and I've been part of acquisitions where there's duplication, and unfortunately, you do have to, for the health of the business, reduce headcount to ensure that the business is operational. And that, I think that's where it gets to be difficult to understand that.
Yeah, and on the political side as well too. So we've been talking kind of at the federal level. So at the next level down, the state level. So now we see different reactions from different states to what's going on. So California is reacting very strongly to different proposals. There have been all these lawsuits that are going on, and all these type of things that stress us out as well. But even within the states themselves, Kara. So let's take, for example, Prop 65 in California. There's new requirements for food that are coming into play for heavy metals, and those type of activities you need to be aware of as well. And lay on top of that supply chain issues with cocoa, and that's the type of information the company needs to react to change.
Yes, absolutely. And and it is interesting that in my humble opinion, and also just having been to Washington D.C. this week with the Women's Summit, I think what is interesting, or what is fascinating, is and just in talking to the lawmakers staff, they have to recognize and realize so much. I feel like I am, and this was said several times this week, I'm an inch wide and a mile deep on my knowledge. So I know a lot about one thing, basically. And lawmakers and in the government, you have to be 10 miles wide and an inch deep. You have to know and understand everything. So I don't know how that would be very stressful for me as a scientist. I like to know and to be the expert in what I talk about when I talk about it. And I would struggle with that. That would be a real struggle. So,
and I haven't even mentioned.
Go ahead.
I haven't even mentioned the biggest one yet from the political side, and that's tariffs. Oh boy, is that impacting us?
Yes, yeah, and that's one again where every staff member that we met with wanted to. They had the same message, because that's what we were talking to them about. But they had the same message that we just want consistency. We just it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, just either on or off, and that would just help everybody with the change, right? That would help everybody.
Right. So even with the amount of change that we've looked at so far, what you need to be thinking about this as a food safety professional is thinking about this and going, how do all these things affect my food safety plans in my company? So let's say that you're a manufacturer and you have a production facility in Canada and you ship your product to the US. Right? If a 25 or 50% tariff or whatever is now slapped on your product, wow, that's a huge problem. So the company at the executive level is trying to figure out ways to react to this. It's like, well, geez, okay, well, we can't sell in the US then because our product will be too expensive compared to our competition. What do we do? Is there somewhere in the US that we can make this product instead? Ingredients. Now these ingredients are coming in and they're being tariffs are being slapped on those. Now we need to reformulate. So R&D is going to be scrambling to remove ingredients that are under tariffs or that RFK Jr. is looking at, and you need to be protective on those things. It benefits you and it shows your company how proactive you are if you're thinking about these things and going to these other groups and talking with them about it. Don't be reactionary. Go and engage in these conversations, right, Cara?
Absolutely, yeah, and you bring up a good point, because not only we're switching information, include the right people in your conversations, right? And so we always tend to, it's the food safety chat, right? So we're trying to focus on food safety, but in changing these ingredients, are you adding allergens? Are you adding any other, ingredient that may not be of the acceptable level that you currently have in formulation? So you include people in your conversations. And I think that's a lot of times where we lapse in our change management control, is not including, maybe you include people, but not the right people.
Right. And so this is that intersection that we often have problems with in what we do, is the intersection between the corporate location and the plants. So if I'm at a plant and I'm the QA manager and I'm responsible for my food safety plan, I need to know if the corporate procurement group is looking at new ingredients because the tariffs are too high and R&D is scrambling to reformulate the products. And to your point, Cara, do we need to make label changes? Maybe we've added an allergen. You need to be asking all these questions up front, because when the ingredients start showing up at your dock and they're going to be making product tomorrow, that's too late.
Absolutely, yeah, and especially allergen. I mean, now you're talking recall, right? You've entered into even deeper regulatory issues. So ensuring that you're including those people in the conversation is the most important thing.
Yeah, and this gets back to those leadership and the people skills. So it's taking this information and keeping an eye on what's going on out there, and then just having those conversations. You don't need to be confrontational. It can be as simple as going to the procurement group and say, hey guys, boy, I'm seeing tons of activity out there around cocoa. And now you're talking their language, to our earlier point. The procurement people are going to love talking with you about that, because that's their area of expertise. To your point, Cara, right? They are very specialized and they have very in-depth knowledge in the procurement world. So just having a conversation with them of how they're reacting to these things can help you decide, okay, so how does this impact my food safety requirements?
Absolutely. Yep. And I, we keep coming back to speak the language, right? And I think as food safety professionals, we tend to be talking acronyms, right? and if you don't have the acronym cheat sheet, you're going to be in big trouble. So and communication gets missed. So you need to make sure that you're on that same page and communicating effectively, but efficiently.
So a lot of times I think in technical fields, and this is something I think we're stressing here as well, and it needs to be talked about, is getting outside of that bubble and talking with these different groups. And that goes a long way to building your credibility in the company, because you're also then seen as a team player. And if you're helping these other groups solve these problems, that's exactly what you should be doing. Oh, no, I'm the food safety guy. I need to be doing food safety. Well, food safety is everything. All of these different groups impact food safety. And you need to be at the front of the game on that, and looking at this and thinking about the business and how the business manages these things. And then that goes down to your food safety plan.
Agreed. Yep, absolutely. And I think Yeah, that is so important to speak that language and diversify yourself, right? I
Mhm.
agree with you. I think sometimes we think in, okay, I'm just the food safety, and again, not to keep coming back to the summit I attended this week, but it was really eye opening for me because I'm used to going to scientific summits, and this was HR and finance, and I mean it was a broad scope of people, and boy, did that help me to expand as a person, and also just realize, and even we were fortunate enough to be able to go and talk to lawmaker staff and realize, wow, sometimes you just see the clips on the news and you don't realize the in-depth information that goes into, and all the knowledge that they have to obtain to make decisions. And
Yeah.
it was really eye-opening for me. But that's the same thing even within your own company. You understand and know the systems. And I think a lot of times we pigeonhole ourselves into understanding and knowing, only the food safety systems. But the company doesn't run just on food safety systems. It's all part
Mhm.
of the entire scope of the business. And
Right.
having broader understanding is only going to benefit you.
No, that's a good point. And so part of this, and this is something I worked very hard on, is you need to communicate to the other groups the importance of food safety and that food safety is a choke point. It is something that most stuff in the company has to run through. So changes in formula from R&D, changes in ingredients from procurement, changes in packaging from the engineering group, all these different things. You need to work with those different groups so that they understand themselves that, oh, I'm making this change. I probably need to talk with the food safety people about this because this may impact food safety. And the more that you can train the other groups to have that mindset, the better off you're going to be.
100%. And also, I think too, I always enjoy, and again, I do a lot of PCQI and HACCP training. I love it when the procurement people come and take it, or lawyers,
Yes.
or our marketing. And especially like marketing is so important because they're the ones that are writing the information that goes to the customers, right, and goes
Yeah.
out to the public, and having them understand that cross contact is allergens and cross contamination is micro may seem very, very minute for marketing when they don't understand the consequences
Yeah.
of terminology.
So you need to think in terms of, okay, how can I make my thought mechanism part of them? So you want to, and I've talked about this on the chat before, Cara, if you're a consistent leader in food safety and quality assurance, people generally already know how you're going to answer a question when they come to you. You want that consistency. And because we work in this field, people look to us for that consistency, right? So change fights with that. So you want these other groups to be thinking about these things and saying, maybe I should talk with Brian about this before I go too farther. It doesn't make sense until I got the okay. A big area that we see this in a lot, Cara, is equipment purchase, right? How many times have we walked through plants and you're doing a tour and you see a new piece of equipment and you're like, what is that?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's like you're manufacturing, hot dogs, and it's like, well, we used to press pineapples with that piece of
Yeah.
equipment. It's like, what? Wait, what? What? That
Yeah.
wasn't what it was meant for. And it's got all kinds of weird folds and angles and all that. So
Yeah, and the engineering group made me really, really proud because they found this piece of equipment on an auction site, and it's been sitting out in a field for a year. And you have no idea, right? They're very proud because they saved the company a lot of money by buying this used equipment. You're not too happy, and guess what? It's now your problem because you weren't being proactive.
right, exactly. And I love that you say that, you got to make it their thought in their process. You got to be included in their process of the procurement, right, of that piece of equipment. I love that they should think, okay, we should go talk to Brian and see what his thoughts are on this. That is, make yourself part of the process. And I know I previously, it was a while ago now, but we actually, for one of the trade organizations, I can't remember which one, but put together a webinar, how to take out the no in innovation from a food safety perspective. And a person I know, a quality manager, director of quality, Erica Bogner, always says that, they always say that she's the no lady, right? Because she's in food safety, and she is the person that always says no. But it doesn't have to be that way if you include the food safety department in the conversation.
Oh, that's so important. I'm going to put this up on the screen here too. Is be a partner, not a roadblock.
Yes, exactly.
Because if you're a roadblock, what do people do? They go around roadblocks.
Mm-hmm. It's like foot foamers, right? They jump over them.
Perfect example, right? I don't want to get my feet wet. Every time I go through here with the chlorine bath, now all my pants are ruined.
Exactly.
I'm not going to step in that anymore. No, you have to understand these things. If you're viewed as someone who always says no, and that was a really good point, Cara, is guess what? They're going to find somebody to say yes. And you're not going to be happy. And that's not a fun place to be, right? Because that then is going to just continue spiraling down to the point where you can't get anything done. And then to our earlier change example, you're probably not going to be in that company for very long. Your career options are pretty limited.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Don't be the foot foamer that everybody jumps over.
Yeah. So imagine how much easier your life would be. So let's say, for example, you work in dairy, and you know that the engineering group, you've heard through discussions from the maintenance guys that the engineering group is looking at some new equipment. Talk with them. Do they understand the specialized requirements in dairy for equipment under the PMO, the Pasteurized Milk Ordinance? The requirements for sanitary design under 3A, do they understand those requirements? Just because you're a mechanical engineer doesn't mean you understand food regulations. So getting an understanding of their level of information associated with that is really important.
Absolutely. Oh, for sure. And that's exactly good. And again, Chris, I appreciate the shout out, but that's exactly why I think, it doesn't matter what your title is, but you should attend these trainings, even if they feel like they're way out of your realm of knowledge, because then you can all talk the same. But what I also say whenever I teach any of these food safety courses is, it's a slice of the pie. Again, they're like we were talking about when you're bringing in weird ingredients or things like that, or changing ingredients. It's just a tiny little slice of the pie, and you have to recognize and realize that everyone is dealing with their own slice, and we got to make sure that we can put the pie together.
Yeah. So the next major area for change you need to keep your eye on very closely is suppliers. There's a reason why foreign supplier verification got its own section in the regs, and why supplier management is a preventive control. It's that important. And you need to really be focusing on this, is demand, right? So we talked about cocoa earlier. If your procurement team is dealing with a highly competitive environment, they're going to be looking for alternate sources. Do they understand the risks? So if they're looking at cocoa, and on our conversation here understands this very well, is okay, great. New cocoa source, send us some samples so we can get evaluated for heavy metals to make sure it complies with Prop 65 in California, because that's an important market for us. It doesn't do you any good to find a cheaper cocoa supply if you're going to get a whole bunch of fines from California because you're out of compliance with Prop 65.
Exactly. And that's why it's important to include all the right people, right? And the people with the knowledge. And again, where you have to understand your limitations. I try to be very cognizant of my limitations and my knowledge. And I always say, I may not know the answer, but I know somebody that knows the answer. And I will play operator, and I will connect you. So.
There you go. Hello.
Yeah, exactly.
So another one is availability. So I had referenced earlier, I saw this on the news, I think it was late last night, is a major typhoon is hitting Madagascar. Okay, great. What, number one, what's Madagascar, right? Big old island off the coast of Africa. What grows in Madagascar? The majority of the world's supply for vanilla.
I was just going to say, oh no.
Right. So you need to be looking at that and going, okay, well, we make vanilla flavored products. Procurement, is going to be aware of this. So just going over there and having a conversation with them and saying, hey, Bill, wow, I see that Madagascar is getting hammered. Is that going to impact vanilla? Oh, God, yeah. Here's the steps that we're doing to replace that potential loss of inventory. And here's some of the things in procurement we're doing to protect the company. Great. How does that impact your food safety plan?
Exactly. Like, does it change it as far as allergens? Does it change it for amount, those types of things? Are they different ingredient line?
Well, and the last time this happened with vanilla, the price just went through the roof.
Oh,
and
gosh.
That's prime territory, as comment here, somebody's ahead of me, is food fraud, right? So now the criminals see that vanilla is trading 20 times the price it normally does. They're going to be making fake products and trying to make a quick buck. So you have to be incredibly vigilant for food fraud when these type of changes occur in the marketplace.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I didn't. And that, again, that would be probably third on the list of what you're thinking about, or what procurement is thinking about. Price being number one, of course. And so absolutely. And it can be, all of a sudden now, who's your supplier and are they approved? You're talking about preventive controls with approved suppliers. All of that comes into play, and you have to start thinking about those types of tactics too.
Yes, absolutely. And be very careful and always pay close attention to your single source materials. So we've got this superfood that we add to our finished product, and you can only buy it from one source in the world. That's a problem, right? Number one, you're going to have very little leverage with them to make sure that they're doing things correctly, because where else are you going to buy it, right? They're going to be like, what are you going to do? So from a food safety standpoint, you have to watch that very carefully.
Yes. And that, I always think, and again, this is, kind of goes back, but I think COVID kind of taught us a lesson, right? A little bit about having backup suppliers. And it's always fascinating to me, because I always think, okay, we got that in a row, right? We figured we got that under control, and then it happens again, and it's like history repeats itself. Everybody's panicking again. We already did this, but we forget, right? You forget.
Yeah. Well, and too, Cara, is that the supplier companies are going through the same thing that you're going through, right? So they're under stress, they're under tariffs, they're under regulatory changes. Their marketing group is like, we've got to sell stuff. We got to figure out a way to do this. So now all of a sudden they come up with a superfood, right? And your marketing team goes, ooh, a superfood. We can, wow, awesome. How'd that work out for taro flour?
Not so hot.
Not so hot. So suppliers should be a huge focus of this area. Your manufacturing plants. The change in your manufacturing plants. New plants that you have. Plants that you've purchased, as we talked about earlier, acquisition. So now all of a sudden, surprise, you have a new production facility because over the weekend, the mergers and acquisitions group bought a new company. Well, number one, you should be involved in that decision-making process up front to look at that from food safety standpoint as well as a financial standpoint, so you're not surprised.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually, as a consultant in my previous positions, a couple positions ago, was hired many times to do that for acquisitions, where I'd go in and do an audit of the food safety program in general and the food safety systems, and then report back to the acquiring company. And many times they would make a decision of the acquisition based on that information. At
Yeah.
least that would be part of their consideration for the purchase of the company.
Yes, 100%. And Tim nailed it here. This is a great way to talk about it. Risk mitigation is key methodology, and everybody understands that. And this is something I'm doing more and more of, is I'm talking with companies about risk management, not audit compliance.
Right.
Because as we've seen, a good audit score doesn't mean that you don't have risk. Right? Ask anybody at Boar's Head that question. Just because you have a good audit score doesn't mean you've removed risk. Everything that we're talking about here is risk assessment, completely different. And I'm going to be talking more about this in the future. I'm actually thinking about, and I'll be curious to see what people think about this, is having separate webinars like this. Just keep doing the food safety chat, but also do ones that focus in on risk management as well, because it's that important.
It's so important. And I don't think people understand or respect the importance of risk management. And I think too, sometimes we lose sight, right? You're talking about audit compliance. I think sometimes people lose sight of what the audit outcome should be. It's not an A, it's not an A plus, it's not a 98. It should be that you are making safe food and that you are not contributing to any type of outbreak or foodborne illness in our communities. When you boil it down, are you making safe food? And that's the purpose of those audit, or at least that was the purpose of audit schematics, was so that you're doing the right thing and in compliance with the regulations, obviously, but also that you are manufacturing safe food. And that feels so basic when I say that out loud. But I think sometimes people lose sight of what the goal is.
Right. And I think that's kind of the central theme. And that's a great way to put it, Cara, for our talk here today. Is a lot of times when we see this, as we put together our food safety plan, we get together the team, and then we go, okay, all good. See you next year. That's a ticking time bomb, because risk management and all of these changes that we're talking about here today doesn't stop.
Nope. Not at all. And it shouldn't. And again, we kind of kicked off with talking about the, plan and not revising the plan. And there's been no changes. And just an example that I had, and this has been quite a while now, and HACCP and food safety plans have definitely become more important or more part of the daily conversation. But a few years ago, it was about 10 years ago, back in 2014, I actually had a customer reach out to me, a previous customer, and say, "Hey, do you have a copy of our HACCP plan?" I said, "Well, when did I write it?" And they said 2004. And I'm like, and I did, but I was like, "Yeah, you've had a few changes, between 2004 and 2014." So,
yeah. Another big area under manufacturing that you need to be aware of is if you're using co-mans. And a lot of times, if a company is launching a new product, they'll go to a co-manufacturer to make that product because they don't have the line, or they're not sure it's going to succeed, or what have you. And in times like this, those type of activities are going to ramp up. Now you're trying to manage something that you don't directly control. And that can be very challenging, and you need to be aware of that.
Absolutely. And sometimes that can be a greater challenge, than using your own manufacturing, because you don't own those programs. The cone manufacturer does. And that can, it's not always the way that you want to run it, but you need to be a good partner in those types of situations.
So we touched on this a little bit, but this ties in very closely with the ingredients and R&D is new products. So all of a sudden, the marketing group wants to launch a new product, and they're going to start selling it to hospitals and nursing homes and elementary schools. Whoa, right?
Ah!
Your risk just went way, 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 way up, and you need
Yeah,
to be aware of that. It's not intended consumer general in your food safety plan. This is all hands on deck situation, and those groups need to understand all the additional controls that need to be put in place if the company wants to do that.
absolutely. And yeah, and that it can be a very difficult task, right? And this is where
Yeah.
you have to use your network and use your communication internally and ensure
Yeah.
that you're not, creating something that, because the worst thing, and I have been part of this in previous life, again, you do all this new product development, you get all the way to testing it with consumers, and it's like, nope, can't. Millions of dollars just absolutely gone. Equipment sitting on the dock that has to be, returned or boneyard. So,
Yep, absolutely. It's like Cortland was talking about earlier, design control. The last category I wanted to mention really quickly, well, is shelf life. So if you're under pressure because of the situation and tariffs, there's going to be pressure to extend shelf life. That can impact food safety greatly. So you just can't tack 15 days on a product and say it's good. How do you know? So you need to be very aware of that. And another key point here I wanted to get in really quickly before we run out of time, something that's overlooked, Cara, and that's logistics and warehousing. That's a really
yeah.
good way to optimize because you're looking for the cheapest way to get the product to its endpoint. But is that introducing risk?
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, this came up in a conversation this week with a woman I was at the summit with. And with everything that's going on, they are trying to increase their warehousing. And she said, it's just not possible. It's just not. And the warehousing is a limited commodity for a lot of people. It's limited by space. And you can't just create more necessarily.
No, absolutely not. And so one of the ways here, really quickly, I'll put the link in here, I promise this, is the locals group where I post 2 or 3 times a week on recalls and regulatory updates and all these. Why do I do this? This is change management. This is keeping track of things. So I did learn here recently from a member on the group that there's 2 ways you can get information. You can go to the group and just look for the information manually and do searches and find what you're looking for. Or the information can be pushed out to you. And every time I post, it will let you know that there's something new in there. But you have to turn that on. And so I put a little video in there on how to turn on that button to make sure that you're getting notifications. So that's the best way to keep up on what's going on out there that I see.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. Good to know.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, Cortland just added a good one. Packaging, food contact packaging. Thank you, Cortland. Very good one.
Yes,
Don't forget that.
absolutely. So much change.
Oh, right. So, man, we're out of time here, Cara. So I wanted to kind of bring this up to the 30,000 foot level and summarize this. What would you like to leave people with here today?
And what I took away with all of this is communication, right?
Mm.
I think it boils down to understanding what change is happening, try to anticipate, but then communication. Just making sure you have that communication internally, externally. Everybody is and utilize your resources.
A 10-minute conversation up front may save 10 days of work on the back end.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
Great summary on that. So part of this as well is being able to be flexible and go with the flow. Right? You know where I'm going with this.
Which is why I'm a blank screen today. Oh, sorry. Right. So I think we're having outages here. So, of course.
And you just kind of have to laugh and go with the flow. And guess what? We were able to put together a kick-ass food safety chat here today. And it didn't matter, right? The information is still being shared. So we can all smile and laugh about it. Because we are good at overcoming obstacles, because that's what we do in quality assurance and food safety. And we've done it again here this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Brian. And We'll figure out the technical stuff on the side here.
No worries. Yep, we got her. And of course, a fantastic contribution from everybody here in the chat. We just have the best group. I mean, the comments in here every week just blows me away. So
Absolutely.
with that, guys, we're going to close out the chat here for this week. Fantastic chat as usual. Thank you, Cara. Always amazing having you on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And we'll see everybody back here next week, of course, on Friday for the next Food Safety Chat Live, where we will live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, and I'll bring another amazing, knowledgeable guest who's 1 inch wide and a mile deep, and we'll give you that insight that everybody's looking for. So have a great weekend, enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.